I managed to write an entire 78,000 word novel in 2 months, from April 1st to May 31st. How did it go? It went. In the end, it's done. I'm going to tell you everything that I loved and hated about this process called fast drafting. But first, welcome. My name is Christina. I'm a fantasy author working in politics, and I'm hoping within the year 2026 to either find an agent or indie publish / self-publish my debut fantasy romance novel. I'm very glad you're here, so follow me along on this journey. I'm going to take you through my writing process, my learning process, and hopefully my publishing process. In the meantime, grab a seat, grab a fun beverage. This is my mocktail, pomegranate, blackberry, yuzu, with a little bit of thyme. Don't worry, I'm going to give you the recipe. I don't gatekeep. Let's get into it. So, what possessed me to be this insane, try to write a book in 2 months? Well, there's no answer. I've literally always been this way. No, really. I've been a writer all my life, and I wrote 4 full-length novels before deciding that I was going to query the one that I am in the trenches with currently. One of them was a dystopia, one of them was contemporary romance, 2 of them were fantasy. I obviously went back to fantasy, which I do think is ultimately my one true love. I've written multiple fan fictions. I think I have probably written over 1 million words of fan fiction by this point. Not original. Who knows how much original work I've written, but pretty sure it's been 1 million words of fan fiction. Which still counts as writing, because what do they say, 10,000 hours of practice? Over the course of my life, every time I have started writing something, I find myself getting stuck in exactly the same spot every single time, almost without fail. I don't think it has anything to do with my writing. I don't think it has anything to do with my concepts, but it always happens at about the exact same spot I hit writer's block. So in doing fast drafting, which I'm going to explain, I was trying to bypass this bad habit that I have. And I think it did work. That's kind of a spoiler. It did actually work. I was inspired to try fast drafting from another author who I follow on Instagram, whose profile I will link down below. She is amazing. I certainly suggest you follow her. So let me get into what fast drafting is. Basically, writing your novel as fast as possible. It's literally exactly what it sounds like. That's it. There's no other rules. There's not really a right way to do it, but generally it's within a very tight timeline, like 1 or 2 months. You're not technically supposed to go back and edit things as you go. More on that later. But the speed is the goal. I think that you could probably consider NaNoWriMo fast drafting, which I never did, but I had tons of friends who did it. What happened to NaNoWriMo? Hold on. Why did people stop doing NaNoWriMo? Okay, the plottery. NaNoWriMo, by the way, if you're unfamiliar, is, I think it was an online forum, or perhaps it was an organization where the challenge was to write, I want to say 50,000 words in the month of November. So essentially writing almost a whole book in the month of November. Yeah, National Novel Writing Month. That's what it stands for. Okay. Okay, so what happened? A forum safety no, that's crazy. Oh my God. Essentially defended AI-assisted writing. Criticizing their choice to support the use of AI or acting classist or ableist, essentially using disabled writers as a shield in the conversation. If Beethoven can write symphonies deaf, you can write a book without AI. Wow, that's crazy. That's insane, guys. Sorry for that aside. That's wild. That's wild. Okay, well, anyway. This was like NaNoWriMo, but 2 months. April and May. Why did I decide to do it? You may ask yourself. Because it is my goal in life to be a full-time writer. I do believe that I have to start treating writing like a full-time job. Is that difficult? Yes. Did I find myself making sacrifices to do it? Absolutely, yes. The first 12 days of the month, I realized that I was not going to hit my goal if I was just trying to fit writing in as I usually do. So I started waking up at 5 a.m. to be able to write before my work day started, which, to be fair, this is not the first time I've done a stint like this. When I was editing my novel the first time around, I was waking up at 5 a.m. to be able to do it before I went to work. And I don't hate it. I like feeling like I have so much of the day left. But anyway, let's get into the roadblocks of fast drafting this way. I think the biggest roadblock to any writer's first draft is time. Truly, I do. I work a full-time job Monday through Friday, and my saving grace here honestly is that I don't have kids, but I am married and I have a dog, and I obviously do have friends and family that I like to spend time with. I also prioritize cooking my meals, working out. I run my social media, which takes so much more brain power than I really wish it did, but I'm also querying. And in May, I had 2 siblings graduate high school, multiple weekends that I was staying with family. So all of these things stood in the way of doing any kind of activity outside of my 9 to 5 workday. Hence why I was waking up at 5, which I'm going to continue to do periodically because I did enjoy it. 61 days is an incredibly short amount of time to draft a full-length novel. Like I said, I think I ended up with 78,000 words. That's at least 1,200 words a day. Did I do that every day? No. In fact, most days I didn't, and I had to make up the words elsewhere. There was the occasional unicorn of a day where I got 5,000-6,000 words out. But for the most part, I was doing it in little 20-minute sprints, which does bring me to my second roadblock. Some days it wasn't that I didn't have any ideas. It wasn't that I couldn't write. It was that I had days where I simply didn't want to. And to me, this felt like more of a personal failing and not a fast drafting problem. Now you might be thinking, Christina, it's not realistic to write every day. It's not realistic to be inspired every day. And you would be right. You would be right. But here's the thing. If it's going to be a job, it has to be treated like a job. Ordinarily, I would have weekends off. I would have that time to sort of reset and replace the time that I'm not feeling inspired with a recharge. But in the absence of being able to take weekends off for this fast drafting challenge, I had to treat this like a job. And I did feel like I had to do it, even when I was not inspired. I totally understand why people have a disagreement with this and why people feel like pushing through writer's block or pushing through a creative block is not necessarily healthy. But I think in the end, I still work a job where I do have to be creative during the day. It's a different type of creativity. Whether or not I'm feeling creative that day doesn't necessarily matter to the deadline. And the words are still words coming out, even if they're bad. I think the best thing that this did was teach me how to work past that writer's block, because I didn't have a month to leave it and then come back to it and make it sound pretty. I just needed to get the story out, whether or not I thought personally that it sounded good. But yeah, the laziness is real. Some days I really just wanted to watch TV. Some days I really didn't want to write. I really didn't have the motivation, and I just kind of wanted to scroll on Instagram. But at the end of the day, it was a challenge and it needed to be done. Not editing was so tough for me. Dude, if you will permit me a moment of drama, this was the worst part about this. I did not expect to hate not being able to edit as I go. I didn't even realize it was something that I did with such frequency. I did end up rewriting the first 4 chapters at one point, and it significantly cut into my time. But I hate not editing as I go. And a point of clarification, I don't like not being able to do big edits. If there were edits like deciding I liked a different word in a sentence, I did that. But changing a character, a plot line, an entire timeline shift, technically you are not supposed to do that. Like I said, I did it, and it did help my momentum through the rest of the project, but it did cut into my time, and I hated it. Hated it. Hated it. I have to edit as I go. Didn't realize it was a habit that I have. I will not be letting go of it anytime soon. The first positive is as much a positive as it is a negative, I think. I did not get hung up on excruciating world building details, okay? I really pride myself on how well researched my novels are. It's something that when I was writing fan fiction, people would point out how much research I put into things. It's in my nature, okay? I'm in politics. But it does take so much time. So much time. And time was precious here, so I did have to move on. I could not spend 2 hours researching hair gel in ancient Rome or familiarizing myself with how an aqueduct is built. I actually already knew that. But I really wanted to go back and like watch those animated videos of how they used to. Either way, listen. I couldn't do it. Time was of the essence. I had to simply get the story out. I have a habit of filing things away for later and spending hours and hours and hours on research, ultimately to not use any of it. And I've developed the opinion throughout this challenge that all of that research is better suited to the first draft edits. Where I did make things really difficult for myself was I tried so hard not to click out of my document when I was in it. I'm so easily distracted. It's one of the reasons why I use Scrivener, because it's just a blank slate and I don't have access to the internet to be able to switch tabs and do research. But I would think of something and I would literally just dump it into brackets in the chapter I was writing in, which I don't know how I'm going to go through all of that. Like I'm not looking forward to going through the draft and trying to pull out all of the little comments that I made to myself within the actual story. So I have to come up with a different system for next time. But all the same, this was a double-edged sword. The way that I write fantasy, so much of the plot is entwined with the world building, and especially with the magic and its uses and its limits and the problems that it causes for the characters. So not having all of that written out beforehand really did have me flailing in some ways, as much as it forced me to move forward without all of those little details. The other thing I really like being done. I love being done. I gotta be honest, I love the fact that I am done with an entire first draft and then I did it in 2 months. That satisfaction alone is fueling me. The idea that I can go back and start a draft 2 rewrite with the story plotted out before me is so nice. Truly, it's nice. They're not lying when they say the first draft is the hardest, because you're just telling yourself the story. There will be a lot of areas that I'm going to have to draw out because the bulk of this was dialogue and action beats, especially as I got to the end. I was really just trying to get all of the thoughts that I had about the ending and about the characters out onto the page. But it feels really nice to be done and to be able to move on to that next phase. Does anyone else get really thirsty when they talk, or am I like Pavloving myself to need to drink? ASMR. In terms of plot and story, I think my biggest surprise was that I had a time period / like vibe change 30% in. I was going for Renaissance and it wasn't working. It was not grand enough. There was so much power and influence that I was trying to work with, and the stakes were simply not high enough with someone else in charge. I needed my characters to be in charge. I have a personal opinion about this in fantasy, and it's the reason why over and over, I will read The Lost Heir. I will read The Chosen One. I will read The Prophetic Savior. Literally every single time. Because stakes are higher when there is more proximity to power. It's both more and less work, I think, to put your characters in positions of power and around other characters with immense amounts of power. I'm specifically talking about political power. A lot of the time in fantasy, this also translates to physical power. But it's one of the things that makes fantasy so much fun to me. We can talk kitchen table politics all day, but for a character in a fantasy novel, things are so much more interesting when they're suddenly in a position to watch decisions being made and to have a significant opinion about them, or to be used as a pawn in those decisions. Even better, that's actually my favorite. So rather than this being a Renaissance leaning like family saga, as much as I love the aesthetic of the Renaissance, my wedding was kind of Renaissance themed, I'm not gonna lie. It became an empire that was loosely based on ancient Rome. The heart of this story, though, because it's a romantasy, is obviously the romance, and the romance that happens between the FMC and the brother of the prince that she is engaged to. Outside of that romance, it's a vampire origin story, so that leads me to what I would do differently next time. As much as not having any of those world building details forced me to move along faster, it also meant that I was writing blind. I felt that I was writing blind. I needed a mythological basis to make sense of how the conflict was going to unfold around the romance, and I didn't have it. I was making up things as I was going along. Like, I was referencing gods that had no names, historical moments that I hadn't fully actualized. I was trying to talk about this centuries-long religious conflict, and I didn't actually know the details of it, but it was informing this whole story that was happening around the romance. There is a point to be made here about the type of story that I fast drafted. If I were to fast draft a near world fantasy or something more contemporary that takes place in a world that's not so dissimilar to ours, I don't think I would run into some of the world building issues that I did. Like, I think fast drafting would be an amazing tool for contemporary romance writers who tend to write, who are very prolific, like who write a lot really fast. I mean, maybe you don't need it. Maybe like technically doing fast drafting, you just don't even know that that's what it's called. But it was difficult because of the amount of world building that I really needed to have done before I jumped into writing the first draft. When I do this again, because I do think that I will, the things that I liked about it definitely outweighed the things that I hated. I'm going to write myself an outline, number one. Like, what was I doing without what was I doing without an outline? I had I'm telling you, my outline was less than a page. I had here's who the character is, here's what I want to happen, here's the midpoint, here's the end. And I'm a pantser. But what was I doing? This exercise really made me feel like, you know what? Y'all got a point with those outlines. You really do. Because what was I doing? I think there's something to be said. I know I said that already. I know I did. I love that phrase. There is something to be said about pantsing works best if you are feeling exceptionally inspired. If you are not feeling exceptionally inspired, plotting is going to save your life. I'm thinking about all of the things that I've written and all the stories I've been able to get out within a short amount of time. And honestly, yeah, pantsing works better when you are just in a season of intense creativity. I am not in a season like that currently, and I think an outline really would have helped me. So next time I'm writing myself an outline and I am building the bones of my mythology and my magic system first. Those are the two things that I was missing the most of as I was writing. All of these things are true no matter how you draft a story. Sometimes things fall out, all works really well. Other times you have to fight for it to come together. I've noticed that this is true the longer that I am a writer. I try to never let there be a long stretch of time where I don't do any writing. But like I said, I absolutely have seasons where the story comes easier. To me, personally, it's important to continue writing even when it's tough. In conclusion, I liked more things about this exercise than I hated, and I'm definitely going to do it again, but for now, I am jumping back into a totally different manuscript, whose first draft is about halfway done, before I go back and rebuild the world of Project Forum. Hi, it's Editing Christina here about a week later with my camera up on a towel roll. Because my tripod's upstairs and I don't want to go get it. It's Editing Christina from the future to say that about a week later, after I finish this, I ultimately made the decision to shelve this draft / manuscript. It's not that I don't like it. I do like the concept. I really liked my magic system. I was not in love with the characters, and I'm very character first writer. I need to understand the character's arc and really be in love with it and know where it's going to go. So I had a cold, like a physical, like a sickness, a sickness that ultimately did give me clarity. We are shelving this manuscript and starting a new one. Hope you follow along. Thank you for watching. This concludes our committee hearing on fast drafting. See you next time. I have a trick for this drink, by the way. If you don't like things super sweet, don't use the cane sugar syrup. Muddle the blackberries and sprinkle a little bit of cane sugar in with the blackberries, and then muddle it and then pour all of the liquid on top of it. You can also switch out pomegranate juice for cranberry juice, but I think cranberry juice is more tart. Pomegranate juice is a little bit sweeter. There's your tips and tricks. Okay, bye. See you next time. I like that. I don't think I like how I said that. Why am I saying look? Girl, it can't go like this.